I don't want to give Nick Caserio too much credit for making that trade because first you can ask the question, why do the defending Super Bowl champions want to get off a guy who they just reacquired in the last offseason and helped them win a Super Bowl? Welcome to the show. And this show was going to begin with the obvious whole lot of MLB hat talk. We'll get to that. We'll talk about Laremy Tunsil. If you missed it, the Rangers have already had their new hat banned because of the vulgarity. They've taken it off the store, their online store. We'll get to that at some point today. But it was going to be all about Laremy Tunsil until the Texans got a dog. They required a player who's perfect for all those Texans aggregation sites who like to talk about swarm and this guy's going to bring something new to the secondary. Although they have it now. He's just another guy in the no-fly zone. They acquired Chauncey Gardner-Johnson for Kenyon Green and a swap of a fifth and a sixth-round pick. I believe they're both 2026 picks. So you have what you might consider your second safety or your third safety, depending on how you want to put the hierarchy of Bullock, Petrie, and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. He will talk. He won't back down. He fits the Texans' mentality of what they want on defense. I don't know how good he is of a leader. I don't know that much about him other than what I see on the field. But they do turn Kenyon Green into a viable player, which is something he was not. I don't want to give Nick Caserio too much credit for making that trade because first you can ask the question, why do the defending Super Bowl champions want to get off a guy who they just reacquired in the last offseason and helped them win a Super Bowl? But beyond that, from the Texans' point of view, you are trading a recent first-round pick who, as I said, was non-viable for Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. From a unit, as far as that offensive line is concerned, that is lacking stability and I would say talent. And that leads us to Laremy Tunsil. If you want to get in on anything, so you certainly can, 713-780-3776, because Chauncey Gardner-Johnson news broke late, and we didn't get to talk about it much on John and Lance. So if you want to talk about it or call in, you can. But Tunsil out. Traded to the Commanders. You swap fourths. You got a second and a third. Those are the major picks in the transaction. And beyond the trade, you start to ask why. Why'd they do it? There was some back and forth. I think it mainly started here, and there are other places that have talked about it. But John and Lance, particularly Lance on Twitter, talked about why this move was made beyond the financial implications of trading Tunsil and having to pay Stingley and Anderson and Stroud and Tunsil coming up on a new deal. It was a culture shift that the Texans wanted. You can read into what they said in the final parts of the season and then into the offseason and what they wanted from their O-line. And you can say Tunsil is the epitome of what they want to change if you go by what people have said about him. Not that anyone has gone on record as far as inside the building, but if you trust the people here, particularly the morning show, and you trust others, you would say Tunsil was a bad influence, and he's a grown man, and there are other grown men. How much of an influence can he be? The pushback yesterday was the players liked him. He wasn't a problem in the locker room. No one said the players didn't like him. In fact, the Texans might say the players liked him too much, and that's why he had to go. Joe Mixon didn't like the trade. On one of the social media posts talking about the trade, he said, hell no, then threw in an emoji, of course, to show his disappointment. So I don't know that this trade is going to be well-liked by Texans players. I'm sure Laremy Tunsil was well-liked. But he's not the one he's not the one. Those guys aren't the ones who had to be happy. It is the people making the decisions, and they feel like he's not a good fit. So they have traded away two guys on opposite ends of the spectrum. A talented, expensive player who had, at least in their eyes, apparently undue influence, and then you have at this point a draft bust. Now he does get traded to Philly in Kenyon Green, so we always have to be wary that he's another Mekhi Becton success story, and Jeff Stoutland turns him into a really good player, and all of a sudden you're like, wait a minute, what? Do we believe? The question is, do we believe Kenyon Green has that in him? Do we, after watching him play when he wasn't injured, do we believe that all it's going to take is one of the best O-line coaches in the game, if not the best, to flip the trajectory of his career? It is somewhat concerning that Jeff Stoutland wants him. Maybe it's just a flyer, but they did trade one of their starting safeties for him, so could it be that much of a flyer? They have to see at least enough in him to offer up Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, unless Johnson was a real problem and we didn't know about it. That's my only hesitation. From the Texans' point of view, I get it. Get a guy in here who can play. And the other thing is, you don't have Jeff Stoutland, so it may not have mattered if you kept him. No matter how good Kenyon Green might be, you don't have the best O-line coach in the game. So you might not have gotten anything out of him. And if the Eagles do, credit to him. But you weren't going to do it, so you make a trade.
Yeah, you had to worry about Kenyon Green turning into a all-pro, all Pro Bowler.
I would go Pro Bowler first.
Okay, you do have to worry about that for as long as he's on the Eagles. But maybe this is just I guess it's not the NBA, so they don't need matching salaries, but maybe they just cut him. Yeah, maybe it's just like, okay, we want to take a look at him in training camp or in whatever, OTAs. Nope, you guys.
You were right about him.
Chris Strasser. Yep, you're right.
It's very possible that this is simply a flyer that doesn't turn into anything for the Eagles. But when a team who knows how to draft and coach offensive linemen trade for one of your missteps, you go, what's that about? Why would they give up a starting safety for him? We don't know, but they did it. He's no longer the Texans' problem. Well, with him gone and Laremy Tunsil gone, the Texans aren't in a Kenyon Green's probably not part of this next thought, but they're not in a better position on the offensive line. Like we can sell the intangibles of not having Laremy Tunsil as a alleged leader. He was a captain, but questions about was that just a status thing as opposed to something he earned. Questions will continue there, but they're not better. And I don't believe right now addition by subtraction is a real thing for them, because I think talent does win on the offensive line. And they haven't done anything at this point. And there's the rest of the offseason and the draft, all the caveats. They have not done anything to this point to mitigate the issues they had last year. In fact, all they've done right now is put at least guys they felt were less talented in spots where they have to play. They have an offseason to figure out who's going to play where, what they can acquire. But right now, they have a worse offensive line room as far as talent.
And that's really only the Tunsil trade.
Yeah, the Kenyon Green thing is not part of it.
I was going to say, I do believe in addition by subtraction when it's guys like Kenyon Green or even Shaq Mason, honestly, where it's like chances are you're just going to be able to find a guy without spending too much. Well, yeah, they haven't been. Then their offensive line's going to stink.
I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm not saying they can't do it.
Able to.
But I watched last year, and the guys they eventually replaced Kenyon Green with weren't any better. The last game of the year, they couldn't block anyone. They couldn't pick up stunts. They have to do what they have not been able to do so far in the Nick Caserio.
And they were going to have to do that no matter what.
Yes. So chances are, I don't know what the chances are. How high are the chances that they find people that are better? Yes, Shaq Mason wasn't good. They also identified Shaq Mason as some guy who would solidify their offensive line. They were wrong about him. Do I trust the Texans to make the right decision with the offensive linemen? No. But the decisions have to be made either way. They're going to have to find ways to improve this offensive line no matter what they did. Now the job becomes bigger because of not the Kenyon Green trade, but the Laremy Tunsil one. He, in my eyes, at the end of the year, was your only guy I would guarantee to come back. Yeah, Titus Howard, because of money, he was going to come back unless you found a trade partner for him. But he was the only guy I was going to be good with being back, even with all the other concerns. Now, I don't like any of their offensive line members right now. Some of those guys are going to play no matter what. And yes, the national narrative for people who don't understand is going to line up with what I'm saying. But I understand why they did it. Like Dan Orlovsky was like, I don't get it. They had a bad offensive line. You see a lot of tweets like that. I don't get it. They had a bad offensive line. Why are you trading away a Pro Bowler? Well, the critical thinking should pop in and go, wait a minute. They had a bad offensive line, and they're trading away their only real good offensive lineman. Now, why would they do that? Are they just dumb, or is there a real reason for that? But a lot of people weren't asking that question. It's like, hey, I don't get it. Why don't you ask a couple questions of people? Either maybe you have people in Houston that you could ask, or just start thinking to yourself, what could possibly be going on in that locker room or in that town that they decide to trade away Laremy Tunsil? Look,
They think good offensive linemen are bad and bad offensive linemen are good because all they did is add bad offensive linemen. So they don't know what a good offensive lineman is.
I feel like there's enough track record, and they pay Laremy Tunsil to know at least he's a good offensive lineman.
Bill O'Brien found him.
He found him.
Or Hugh Freeze or whoever.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze.
At Ole Miss.
Hugh Freeze found him. And then the Dolphins drafted him because of the bong mask. He was able to slip. So there it is. A couple relatively major trades because of the names involved as far as what you got back from the Eagles. And then, of course, Tunsil out the door, too. So the Texans got better in the secondary, which was actually a strength. But you needed another safety, and you get him. And now I would feel like the rest of the major priorities in the offseason are figuring out what that offensive line is going to be once September rolls around.